All right, how could I forget? You got to have a handle, right? Let's get that slapped on there. Pretty straightforward. And you're going to end up with 4 coarse threaded self-tapping screws. That's what they look like. And you really don't need to be using thread lock or anything like that. And it's screwing into the plastic handle assembly or tank assembly. And so again, word to the wise, don't over tighten. If you do, you're going to have to find some slightly larger coarse threaded self-tapping screws, and then hope that that doesn't cause any issues. You'll have to have the right length so that you don't go too deep. Or you'll be in for a whole new handle or tank assembly, which I think, you know, that tank assembly is going to easily run 120, 130 bucks or something. Probably more now with tariffs and all that. So anyway, just gonna insert it this way. Pretty straightforward. Again, we'll be using 4mm. And what I'm going to do is just get them initially started. Let's do it by hand first, just to make sure it doesn't seem like we're cross-threading anything. It's going in nice and easy. As is that one. We'll stop about right there. And we'll pop this upside down here. You'll know if you don't get them started right. You'll feel resistance pretty much right away. Keep refitting things if you feel resistance. Because yeah, you'd really hate to end up stripping one of these. Don't like the way that's going on. There, I think we may have found the problem. Just the tiniest bit of tension, and you'll get it started at the wrong angle and end up cross-threading things. Once you get them on right, you'll know it. They'll go on super easy. Now, one of the problems with these screws, especially the ones on the bottom of the handle assembly, is the ends get jammed really well with debris over time. And so what you're going to want to do, and I've got a little bit, just enough to get this tight, but there's a little bit right in here maybe, and you probably can't see it, but so just get these snug and just don't go overboard or you'll immediately strip them. But it's a good idea to have a dental pick or something and just pick those out from time to time, especially before you need to check them or take them off, so that you don't run the risk of both stripping the head as well as you'll strip the end of these little Allen wrenches then too. Okay. So good idea to every once in a while in the field just quickly check these. Don't tweak them, just check them to make sure they're still tight, because if they start to loosen, then they're going to be vibrating some and they'll end up stripping the housing out. So look at that. Man, we're just about done with this build. Now the other thing I'm going to do is maybe not apparent for a lot of people, but on some of the newer saws you see that integrated with the top of the cylinder cover, right over the muffler, you will see a foil tape. Basically similar to like what you see for a heat shield around the cylinder behind the muffler. And those foil, it's aluminum, does a really good job of reflecting heat and keeping that off of the cover. Otherwise, you run the risk of melting your cover. There's a lot of reasons why your saw can overheat. A lot of times it's because of operator error. But regardless, when the top of this thing gets hot, it starts to melt the cover. And as it turns out, there was an indication that the saw was run at least once with and got a little warm because there's a tiny bit of melting here under the end. So I'm going to pull this off and clean it up with some alcohol, and then apply some foil tape that I found online. I've used this on a number of different saws, and that's just an extra protective barrier to keep from melting that. And it's really very important for an old saw like this. This is in tremendous shape, but you know, if all of a sudden you lose this because this is over a 30-year-old saw, you cannot find those. So you got to have your shroud, you got to have a cover for your air filter, and this is a two-piece one. I'm not going to find it anyplace else, and it could actually be difficult fitting some other engine cylinder cover, retrofitting it onto this saw. So I want to protect this as best I can. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing this. And then might as well mention that it's not a bad idea for parts like this that are essentially unobtainium. Try and find a used spare someplace. You might need it someday, and they're only going to get harder to find. And once you can no longer find those parts, and if you don't have something like this, you know, quite honestly, you're pretty much done using the saw. Or it's going to be harder to maintain, or it's just going to become a pain, and you're just done. You're going to scrap it, and it's kind of a shame to scrap something like this because of a little part like that. Otherwise, you got to be real ingenious and try and devise an alternative and fabricate it yourself. Okay, so I've got to get another screwdriver here. So on the Husqvarna, you got integrated bolts that come from the top. There's only one here on this saw over above the fan cover. Otherwise, you got the bolt that's integrated into the case, and you slip it over the top, and then you got top nuts like that lock down. I don't know which is better, but this is not a very common design, and probably because it's not as effective. I don't think this seals as good around the air box as having one contiguous unit. So anyway, let's pop this off, see if we can get it off without having to take the handle off the saw. There we go. So right in here, you can see where it melted. I'm going to have to scrape some of that off a little bit. I'll do that off camera, probably using a chisel and a knife. And then after that's done, I'm going to go ahead, and this whole area right here is going to get treated with some isopropyl alcohol, dried off real well, and then I'll apply that foil tape. So I'll show you the aftermath of that, what it looks like when I'm done. Well, so there's what she looks like. Everything this side all the way up to the side here. Got it all cleaned up. You can see where there's a little bit of excessive heat at some point. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and cut the foil tape to fit and show you what that looks like. And there you have it. That's what it looks like. Overlapped a couple pieces of that foil tape, and that should really help us preserve this shroud over the long run. So yeah, there you go. She's coming together nicely. So we still got to get the clutch cover on there and make some alterations to the clutch cover. And we'll talk about that next. All right. So she's coming together. We got a saw. Can't wait to fire this up. So probably gonna get even a longer bar for this. Probably step it down to a 050 instead of an 058 chain and bar. This is an 18. Probably gonna go with maybe even a 24 on this. But anyway, I've confirmed that everything matches up with and works well with the saw on the clutch and whatnot. So before we finish though, there's a few things I want to do. So I put this on this bench overnight underneath the saw just to make sure that I didn't have any leaks coming from the oil tank, and I don't. What you're seeing here is just the oil that was on the bar and the chain. That originally came with the saw. And yeah, I don't have these loose yet, but there's a couple improvements I want to make to this saw. And both of them are probably kind of important, really. One is fairly common, the other one you don't see a lot, other than some of the new saws these days do come with one of these features. So the first thing, which is obvious, is what we're going to do is continue drilling that hole out right there, daylight it through the metal clutch cover so that we can lock down the bumper spike, so we don't have to worry about, and actually it fits the other way around here, but that way we don't have to worry about having to constantly fit this every time we take off this doggone bumper spike, right? We shouldn't have to do that. And I don't know, we'll see. Actually, anyway, there's that, and then the matching steel guide plate here. We can also lock that down using the same bolt. So what I'm going to do here is, and maybe I'll show some of this, but just to explain it, in case I decide to do it off camera, is I'm just going to first drill that out to the right size. Then I'm going to probably tap it. It's an M4 or 4mm diameter, 0.7 thread count. And, you know, so then I can put an M4 hex cap bolt through there, through here. Probably, it doesn't really matter what direction. If I get the right length bolt, then I'm probably going to put a nut on the other side as well, so that it's for sure never going to come off. And you know, the nut or the end of the bolt, if it's daylight's past this here, is going to fit in the bar slot. I'll probably mount the bolt from the inside out, because the bolt head then will fit in here no problem. And then on the outside here, I will mount a nut on that, a nylock nut, and so we'll be good to go. The old guide plate was all marred up. It actually had a tear in it, and that's probably because it was loose from time to time, because it was never locked down. And of course, that was then getting to the point of it was potentially damaging, you know, a chain, so it needed to be replaced. So being able to lock everything down into one unit like this will be pretty handy. All right, so turns out a 1/8 inch drill bit will fit in here without widening that hole at all. As soon as you go up to a 9/64, it's a little too much. You know, if you want to tap that and maybe screw into that threaded portion of the casing that you make with a tap and die, you want to kind of preserve that. I think pretty sure an M4 will fit in there perfectly once it's tapped, but you don't want to widen that hole any. I'm just going to position this over a hole here in my sawhorse and try my best to keep it lined up perpendicular here. Okay, a few metal shavings here to deal with. That made a real nice hole. I don't even have a burr there to have to deal with. All right, I'm going to clean that out a little bit. Still got oil residue in this saw that's little shavings are adhering to. All right, so we have our hole drilled. Now I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get that tapped. Just going to verify that if I line all these holes up, that hole I just drilled is centered, and it is. And that's what that is for. That's for locking this down, in addition to affixing the metal guide plate. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get my tap and die out. Be back at you. All right, just going to show you this here on this table that I had for my tap and die. I didn't even look at it. I should have. 4mm. I know it's 0.7. That's the kind of standard, and that's, I know what I purchased, and that's what my thread finder indicated I had. So there you go. That's what I'm looking for. That would be the drill size in millimeters, and guess what? We used 1/8. So we used exactly what we needed to, what was recommended for that, okay? All right, let's see how this works. And if it doesn't work the way I want, then I'll just, no problem. We'll just increase a slightly bigger hole, and we'll just do a through bolt configuration here. We're gonna have a nut on it one way or another anyway, so just gonna get it started. This is soft metal, so it should really go pretty well. So what I'm doing is threading it. Now I'm going to back off it a little bit and then go back down. And that just makes for better threads. It helps clean out the hole. Now I'm by no means an expert on using a tap and die. But if you start feeling some resistance, then you should be backing off of it. That's the way I learned. So just go slow. I think some people might even use some fluid here. But you should be able to see whether the shavings are coming out easily, and then you should be able to know when, maybe there's a little too much resistance there and you need to back off of it. So having a system like this is, I think, pretty important, because with a saw you may have all kinds of bolts that get stripped in the case, and so you may have to use different bolts, do some tap and die. There's threaded inserts you can buy as well, and some of those may actually thread in. So if you don't already have a tap and die set, pretty worthwhile having one, in my opinion. All right, this is done. Let me clean that off there, and I'm just curious. I'm going to go ahead and grab a M4 bolt. Here I've got an M4 by, I think this is 16, which I think is what I'm gonna need. Holy buckets, look at that. That threads just absolutely beautifully. Just beautifully, okay. All right, so what I'm gonna do is actually mount the head of the bolt from the inside. The head of this cap screw is actually, it's just a little bit smaller and not as deep as the, or as tall as the height of that nut. And I just want to make sure there's absolutely plenty of clearance inside the bar groove. So everything's going to be mounted from the inside out. So I've already looked at the distance here, and you really do need a 16 millimeter long bolt. You could go longer, especially since you're going from inside out, if you don't feel you're getting enough grab. But it does turn out that there is plenty of grab for that nut on this side by going with the 16. And because I could go with a bare nut here if I don't feel I'm getting enough purchase and grab, but that hole is fairly large compared to the nut. Again, I'm going with an M4 instead of an M5, and so I just want to make sure that nothing's gonna get pulled through over time, or just a little bit too close to the height of that, or the diameter of that nut. And so really the biggest challenge now is with the driver, and with a nut driver, and with a hex head here, is to, you know, make sure you get these tight enough, but you still have to line up your holes on the bar. So actually I'll show you what I think is the best way to handle that. So I'll get you turned around here. All right, so because I threaded it and I'm wrenching it in opposite directions across that axis, I didn't have as much leverage with the T-handled wrench, so I've gotten a 3 millimeter Allen for a socket here, and first of all, let's get this lined up, and then we'll tighten. This is tightening it up against the threads. I'm running the risk here of actually stripping the head of this little bolt. I'm kind of most concerned about that. All right, now we're going to hold that tight and fast while we tighten in both directions with similar force. And you know, if you don't have it incredibly tight, it's not the end of the world, because then you can move these, but this is definitely tight enough for our purposes. So it's going to actually take a little bit of force to move the plate, and because we've tightened it across the face here, it's a nylock nut. I think it's quite unlikely that that's going to end up coming apart. So now we can very easily remove and install the clutch cover without having to fool around not needing extra hands and not having to worry about things not fitting together right. And of course, then you got your bar you'd be fooling around with in that scenario. This is just a much easier way to kind of skin that cat, so to speak. All right, so let's go ahead and we've got our foil installed on the top of the cover. We've bolted down our bumper spike and our chain guide. You know what? We're ready for a test. Hey guys, Bowman here. Hey, a little addendum to this Jonsered 625 build. I'm going to interject this and then we will resume normal programming. But I noticed when I went back and looked at videos that the notice right here, there's scoring there and there clearly from a chain. There's no way that should be able to happen under normal circumstances. See the relief there from the bumper spike? That should not literally ever be possible, but I know why it happened. So remember, I told you that this old plate needed to be replaced, and that's because it's perforated right here and it's got sharp edges. It's also scored and perforated right here, but you can barely see it. And now you can see on the inside where it ended up getting very hot, indicating that the chain was rubbing up against it. Well, how that happened was this bumper spike right here was mounted on the inside of the clutch cover with the metal plate on top of it. And so then trying to get the clutch cover tight and so forth, things weren't lined up well, and those items were simply just too close to the chain. Probably only happened once, that all it took, and then the operator continued to use this particular the old plate, which they shouldn't have done. But at any rate, that's why I had to replace that particular plate. And for those that have this style or any style saw with a bumper spike mounted on the outside of your clutch cover, it's there for a reason. Make sure you know how things fit, especially if your bumper spike isn't locked into your clutch cover, because if you mount it the wrong way around, you're going to cause yourself some issues. Not the least of which will be you'll end up having to completely resharpen your chain because the whole thing will be dull. All right, Bowman out.